Oh my God. Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mudahar. And you know what? SBF, Sam Bankman Fried, aka FTX's former CEO, aka the worst League of Legends player on the planet, has actually been arrested, ladies and gentlemen. I know. Actual justice happening. Now, for those of you who haven't been following, as you all know, cryptocurrency is one of the things that I'm into. I've covered a lot of crypto shenanigans and scams and scumbaggery in the past, and I continue to do so. And one of the things that I've been keeping a close eye on was Sam Bankman-Fried. Now, Sam Bankman-Fried, of course, as you all know, is the former CEO of FTX. FTX, for those of you who don't know, was a company that was basically a cryptocurrency exchange and basically one of the largest crypto hedge funds. If anything, it was the second largest cryptocurrency exchange on the planet at the time. Now, of course, it all completely fell down, and one of the things we got to go into is sort of the timeline. But to understand what's going on, he is actually arrested. According to the U.S. attorney, earlier this evening, Bahamian authorities arrested Samuel Bankman-Fried at the request of the U.S. government based on a sealed indictment filed by the SDNY. We expect to move to unseal the indictment in the morning, and we'll have more to say at the time. Now, of course, according to people who are close to this source, they actually said that apparently the charges could include wire fraud conspiracy, securities fraud conspiracy, money laundering, and a whole bunch of other goodies. Now, of course, ladies and gentlemen, this is a pretty serious charge to get, very serious indictments, and he could be looking at some pretty juicy time in jail, as Sam Bankman-Fried should. Now, to go over the entire timeline, I think it's fair to just summarize this for people who are a little bit lost on this situation, because a lot has actually gone on. Now, if you go to FTX's website, or ftx.us, it'll reroute you to this entire Kroll website, which is talking about the restructuring of this now defunct company. But to go over it, around November 2nd, what had happened was CoinDesk, a cryptocurrency news website, basically leaked out a balance sheet. Now, of course, with this balance sheet, what apparently happened was the balance sheet showed that a company known as Alameda Research was actually putting a lot of their collateral into FTT, which was an FTX-based token, from what I understand. Now, of course, you can imagine when you have a lot of this put out there, when you have a lot of this collateral, there is a high amount of risk and volatility for FTT as a token, and of course, it started basically fearing everyone. It basically started spreading a lot of fear for people who were looking at the reserves of Alameda Research, FTX, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, a few days later, Shenpeng Zhao, who's the CEO of Binance, which is the largest cryptocurrency exchange, basically FTX's rival, basically said that they were going to flood the market with $500 million plus worth of that FTT token because of this information. So as part of Binance's exit from FTX equity last year, Binance received roughly 2.1 billion USD equivalent in cash, BUSD and FTT. Due to recent revelations that have come to light, we have decided to liquidate any FTT on our books. Now, of course, ladies and gentlemen, what happens is when one big transaction like this happens and one big flood like this happens, a lot of investors were rushing to basically withdraw all of their money, and effectively what it started was what is known as a liquidity crunch. Now, for those of you who don't know what a liquidity crunch is, let's go over the exact definition together. Now, liquidity crunch, according to Investopedia, liquidity crunch is a financial situation characterized by a lack of cash or easily convertible to cash assets on hand across many businesses or financial institutions simultaneously. So basically, the idea is that you just don't have a lot of cash, and then what will happen is you've got cash flow problems, you've got issues where you cannot meet those short-term obligations necessarily. You can't repay loans, you can't keep your operation going, like you can't keep the day-to-day running, and so on and so forth. So of course, when this started happening, then it started a snowball effect, which led to FTX's massive collapse. Now, a few days later, SBF even said, hey, a competitor is trying to go after us with fake news. FTX is fine. Assets are fine. Now, of course, Sam Bankman-Fried had an interesting history with Twitter as well, too. He was constantly deleting tweets while also posting like one-word tweets at a time, so that people who were using Social Blade to analyze SBF's Twitter history were probably unable to identify if he was actually deleting things. So it's kind of like interesting, but people really did catch on to it, and of course, it all started to again snowball and crash even further. A day later, Bankman-Fried and Zhao announced that basically they were going to actually get FTX bought out by Binance. So, of course, this afternoon, CZ says, FTX asked for our help. There's a significant liquidity crunch. To protect user, we signed a non-binding LOI, intending to fully acquire FTX.com and help cover the liquidity crunch. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, a day later, Binance comes out and says, hey, as a result of corporate due diligence, as well as the latest news reports regarding mishandled customer funds, we've decided not to pursue the potential acquisition of FTX. It's like dangling a carrot out. It's like dangling a lifeline and then immediately pulling it back as soon as the guys grab the string. Of course, this caused doom and gloom even further. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, if that wasn't worse, if that wasn't the worst thing that could have happened, well, you also had other companies like Sequoia Capital coming in and giving their own take on the situation. So for instance, dear limited partner, we are reaching out to share an update on our investment in FTX. In recent days, a liquidity crunch has created a solvency risk for FTX. The full nature and extent of this risk is not known at the time. Based on our current understanding, we are marking our investment down to $0. Sequoia Capital's exposure to FTX is limited. We own FTX.com and FTX US in one private fund. FTX is not a top 10 position in the fund, and our $150 million cost base account for less than 3% of the committed capitals to the fund. What's important is they literally said we are marking our investment down to $0. And what that means is they consider it a total fucking loss. And of course, that's not good in any capacity. Now, of course, at this point, the smell had started to reach the United States Security and Exchange Commission, and an investigation was effectively starting to come and brew. So the next thing that happened, of course, in this fluid situation, was the Bahamians got involved, and they started freezing the assets of FTX. Today, the Security Commissions of the Bahamas took actions to freeze assets of FTX Digital Markets and related parties. The commission also suspended the registration and applied to the Supreme Court of the Bahamas for the appointment of a provisional liquidator of FTX Digital Marketed Limited. So, of course, yeah, they started freezing assets, and SBF at this point in time, all right, if you look at it around, the 10th of November, yeah, SBF was like, I'm sorry, that's the biggest thing. I fucked up, and I should have done better. Ooh. So this is, of course, SBF coming out to be as transparent as he possibly can. Now, at this point, SBF was doing, and still is, last I checked from last night at least, still was doing Twitter Spaces where he was talking to the general community on the internet. And I have to give a big shout out to my friend CoffeeZilla, who's been covering the FTX situation the best out of any YouTuber or any reporter I've ever seen, period. And I have to believe that now that SBF is arrested and he's going to be put up and there's going to be a bigger investigation, if Coffee doesn't get referenced at all in this entire thing, in this entire actual investigation, I'm going to be a sad panda. Seriously, check out his channel for a full coverage. He's literally got this man's balls in the fire, so to speak. This man's chestnuts were roasting in the fire by our friend Coffee. So I absolutely urge you check out his content. But anyways, let's get back to the summarization of events. Eventually, what had happened was the bankruptcy from FTX. So here FTX is straight up saying that they're actually going to Chapter 11. So today it announced that West Realm Shire Services, Alameda Research, and approximately 130 additional affiliated companies, together the FTX Group, have commenced voluntary proceedings under Chapter 11 of the U.S. Bankruptcy Code in the District of Delaware. So here they got John J. Ray III, who's been appointed Chief Executive Officer of the FTX Group. Basically, this man is the liquidator in the situation, and he's going to basically do a thorough analysis of what actually happened during these bankruptcy filings. Now, at this point, this is where things started to go really bad, okay? So at this point, Alameda and FTX was brought into question specifically. Wall Street Journal published an entire story where they were said that FTX was literally handing out their actual customer deposits to Alameda. Now, of course, remember, both these companies are supposed to be separate. This brought up a lot of, questioning into their relationship specifically, how these funds were handled. Remember, the customer who deposited their money into FTX didn't know that their money was just being swapped around like that. It should have been transparent, which according to how this reporting was going, it was not. Of course, if you looked even further into it, around $1 billion to $2 billion were actually apparently transferred and vanished from the FTX platform, allegedly using a backdoor and specialized software to conceal this fact from people who could have actually accounted it, to people who could have audited this. It says in one of these that Bankman-Fried is said to have built a backdoor into the accounting system, which allowed the disgraced founder to change FTX's financial records without alerting external parties, including auditors. Of course, the CEO denied that that ever happened, that he was ever solicited or installed such a method, and responded, of course, with question mark, question mark, question mark. That's a pretty big allegation to give to anybody, and of course, you got to have something to back it up with, which later on we find that might have actually been the case. Let's read it. Now, of course, at this point, even politicians had to get involved because it turned out Bankman-Fried was a big mega donor to the Democratic Party. So, for instance, right here in a post on the 16th, today the ranking member of the House Services Committee, Congressman Patrick McHenry, Republican of Northern Carolina, and the chairwoman of the House of Financial Services, Congressman Maxine Waters, Democrat of California, announced a bipartisan hearing into the collapse of FTX and the broader consequence of the digital asset ecosystem. In December, the committee expects to hear from the companies and individuals involved, including Sam Bankman-Fried, Alameda Research, Binance, FTX, and various related entities. Now, to understand, this is a prelude to what is going to be a heavy hand of actual regulations in crypto, which could absolutely hurt cryptocurrency's pricing and the futures of it. But if you want cryptocurrency to be a usable currency, then you're going to have some regulations. And I know that is antithetical to the idea of cryptocurrencies, but that's just how things have to go if we're going to prevent situations like this happening in the future. Now, the name John J. Ray III, which you mentioned earlier, who is basically the liquidator of FTX Trading or FTX Group, he made a 30-page declaration that is one of the most damning things that I've ever read. So let's actually go through it. I, John J. Ray, hereby declare under penalty of perjury as follows. He's the chief executive officer of the above captioned debtors and debtors in possession. So, of course, FTX Trading. So let's read some of the wild things that he has to say. Now, in one of the first posts, he says, "Never in my career have I seen such a complete failure of corporate controls and such a complete absence of trustworthy financial information as occurred here. From compromised systems integrity to faulty regulatory oversight abroad to the concentration of control in the hands of a very small group of inexperienced, unsophisticated, and potentially compromised individuals." Jesus Christ, that, if that's what he's saying with a career like his, it's pretty bad. But of course, it gets worse. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, when it came to disbursement controls, here's the funniest part, okay? The debtors did not have the type of disbursement controls that I believe are appropriate for a business enterprise. For example, employees of the FTX Group submitted payment requests through an online chat platform where a disparate group of supervisors approved disbursements by responding with personalized emojis. They got payment requests and they're using emojis. Jeez, it's like oh man, it's like iMessage and like big finance cross. In the Bahamas, I understand that corporate funds of the FTX Group were used to purchase homes and other personal items for employees and advisors. I understand that there does not appear to be documentation for certain of these transactions as loans, and that certain real estate was recorded in the personal name of these employees and advisors on the records of the Bahamas. Jesus, guys, come on. If money wasn't... It's like a bunch of kids had access to tons of cash and they just went on these buying sprees. This is not a normal business. Now, of course, as we saw earlier when we talked about that weird backdoor, this is where it gets even wilder. So in digital assets custody, the FTX Group did not keep appropriate books and records or security control with respect to its assets. Mr. Bankman-Fried and Mr. Wang controlled access to digital assets of the main business in the FTX Group, with the exception of Ledger X, regulated by the CFTC, and certain other regulated and/or licensed subsidiaries. Unacceptable management practices included the use of an unsecured group email account as the root user to access confidential private keys and critically sensitive data for the FTX Group companies around the world, the absence of daily reconciliation of positions on the blockchain, the use of software to conceal the misuse of customer funds, the secret exemption of Alameda from certain aspects of FTX.com's auto-liquidation protocol in the absence of independent governance, as between Alameda, owned 90% by Bankman-Fried and 10% by Wang, and the dot-com silo in which third parties had invested. The debtors have located and secured only a fraction of the digital assets of the FTX group they hope to recover in these Chapter 11 cases. The debtors have secured in the new cold wallets approximately $740 million of cryptocurrency that the debtors believe is attributed to the WRS, Alameda, or dot-com silos. Jesus Christ, man. Reading this, it's damning. It almost doesn't feel real reading how, just brain damage this company was running. This is the second largest exchange. It used to be the second largest exchange, and it was run it was run by a bunch of babies. That's what it is. Literally run by a bunch of actual man children. Now, honestly, this has been a big story that has been just constantly expanding as time goes on, all right? This is basically like the Big Bang for crypto, okay? Like one boom, one balance sheet, one leaked balance sheet led to an entire chain of events that got the second largest cryptocurrency, exchange completely blasted out. And effectively, what's just happened now, what's just basically occurred is Sam Bankman-Fried basically, was hidden for a little bit, was on Twitter Spaces, and now he's got criminal charges filed against him by the U.S. And you bet that a lot of these federal agencies, they're going to make an example of this guy. All right, at the end of the day, you can't do what Bankman-Fried did and expect to get away with it. Obviously, he, screwed a lot of people over, not just the little guy. Forget the little guy. This whole thing was never about the little guy. The government does not care about you. They care about the large people that he screwed over, the politicians that he made look like chumps, the people that believed in him looking like absolute tools now. Yeah, you bet he's going to be made an example over this because of all of that. That's what's ultimately the story here. The SEC, the FBI, a lot of these organizations that have jumped in to prosecute Bankman-Fried are doing it because they have egg on their face, and they have to do it if they want to show some modicum of justice in today's world. If it's one thing to glean from this is obviously after FTX, the crypto market is still probably going to go through a further downturn, simply because every government agency now is going to be looking at pretty strict regulations in order to use this. Look, my hot take about this is cryptocurrency. The worst thing about cryptocurrency is the user base, okay? A lot of the people who jump into crypto projects are like, hey, I'll just throw some money into a project, maybe it'll 100 times its value. And that's such a negative, bad way of thinking about the future of such technology. At the end of the day, this is all currency. And if we can't use this currency to purchase tangible assets or just use it at a store or have some form of control over it, some form of consumer protections, then is it really worth keeping around? Look, as bad as regulations sound and as bad as they are, it may be the only thing that allows us all to use this as an actual currency going on in the future. As far as Bankman-Fried goes, I have no sympathy for such a scumbag. And given all the reporting I've seen about him, given everything that I've been researching about this man for the last few weeks, which has, caused my dark circles to become even darker, I wish no good for this guy. Okay, at the end of the day, he's lost everything, and no jail time is enough for a scumbag like this. A lot of people got screwed over, and honestly, this is the only bit of justice that people are actually seeing. For a lot of people who've lost their earnings completely in cryptocurrency, this might be the one smile that they've been able to crack in the last few weeks. This scumbag actually being put in some form of, this person actually being held accountable. That said, ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am